The last time, when we talked about Tinbergen's 4 questions, we mentioned proximate level and ultimate level reasons for why behavior actually happens. And the first two include proximate level questions, and these are proximate level questions. Mechanisms that cause it. They can be anything. A visual cue is a mechanism that might stimulate a certain behavior. It could be hormonal. It could be neurological. Many of these behaviors obviously include all sorts of different mechanisms that ultimately cause the behavior. And then secondly, it's important, how does it develop? So some behaviors are initially performed full-fledged and perfect. Let's say we think about babies and their suckling instinct. They don't have to be taught that. Doesn't actually have to be developed properly. They do it automatically, presented with the correct stimulus. It's probably initially a matter of touch, and then visual, I would imagine, as well. So, let's go here. So, this is development. Or ontogeny. We've heard about, let's see, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. So development sometimes recapitulates or does the same thing as phylogeny. So, for example, humans, at a certain stage in the fetus, we develop gill slits. But that doesn't always happen. Now, now there's this ultimate, and we'll say this is ultimate. Initially, what is its survival value? Or basically, what is its fitness value? Because it's not always survival. We think about sexually selected characteristics and sexual selection. That's mating success. How many offspring actually leave. So it's not just survival value. It's reproductive fitness. And then, in terms of phylogeny or being ancestral, how did it evolve? Is it an ancestral trait, or is it a newly derived synapomorphy? So, take a look again. This is, in this lineage, we'll say, this is natural selection at work, and then in this, phylogenetic effects. Okay, so we talked about, first of all, how behaviors actually happen. This is development or ontogeny. I'll get that fixed later. Ontogeny means development. You've probably heard about ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. So you look at human beings, and as their fetuses, at a certain point we have gills. Now, it doesn't always work. We have a lot of features that are actually more like, what are they? More like neonates or young animals or young primates. We have a flat face instead of a protruding face. So, so we have mechanisms that actually cause behavior, and they can be anything. A visual cue can stimulate stuff. which of course then involves neurology, and the neurons fire. Some things they fire automatically, other things it involves actually cognitive processes. And then of course a lot of these behaviors actually develop over time. We don't all speak perfectly when we're born, but we go through this process, and you can actually see in little kids or babies, they go through stages in terms of learning how to speak and using language. Okay, so that's development. Now those are proximate. They don't actually, they tell you how things develop, but they don't exactly explain why things develop. So there's ultimate causation. We're going to get into this more often, but to start with, something might be adaptive. In other words, it's under strong selection or weak selection. It's under selection, and individuals that express that behavior in the correct way have, let's say, higher fitness than individuals who don't. And so if there's some sort of genetic control, it's expressed, eventually the populations in the future will all be individuals with the adaptive trait and not some inferior facsimile. And then ultimately, this could be the result of evolutionary history. At one time, it was adaptive, or it still may be adaptive, but you can actually look at it in terms of the lineage that you're studying and whether related species or related taxa exhibit the same behavior. Just because of their evolutionary history, it's not like it's newly adapted versus a lineage like us and clapping. We don't usually have other, I don't think there's other animals out there that clap. So that's supposedly adaptive. We can come out with a whole bunch of different reasons for why it's there. Okay. So here we are with these flies, and we talked about nuptial gifts. Anybody remember what a nuptial gift is? I know you do. Yeah.
So you give as a signal of like quality.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's usually involves mating. You folks probably do it in terms of the person you're in love with or you're dating at the time. You might give them a little gift and to show your affection. That, of course, makes them feel good, and you might get the affection back, plus some wild sex or something like that. So, now in this case, these flies, normally they would have this little gift wrap insect, and they'd bring it in some other related lineages. They would bring it to the female. The male would bring this gift, and there'd be a nice little present inside, and the female would start feeding on it. And if it was a decent-sized gift, she would copulate as long as she's eating, and then she'd lose interest in the guy, right? But in this case, it's actually deceptive. In fact, it's kind of interesting that selection actually hasn't favored a more discerning female, right? Because obviously she's getting deceived. She's just getting a package with nothing in it. I mean, what does that tell her about the quality of the male? Oh, he's not a very good hunter. Is that the kind of male? Or maybe she's thinking, well, God, he's deceitful. Maybe being deceitful will give me sons and daughters that are deceitful, too. And that might actually, they're not thinking all that kind of stuff. But they're getting by with the fact that the female is actually taking that, not getting much out of it, but she's still having sex with the male. And in this case, in this lineage, yeah?
Why do we assume that there should be food in that, and there's like deception going on?
Okay, because it looks, if you actually look at the phylogeny of this, Um, let's consider the comparative method, and we're going to look at this in terms of phylogenetic context. So the idea here is, the hypothesis is that the male is bringing, in this case, a fake gift to stop the female from eating him so that he can mate with her and then perhaps mate again. So what do we need for this to actually happen? Let's look at the phylogeny. We will consider the terminal taxa to be D. And this taxa is the fly. The male brings an empty packet to the female. If, in fact, this gift is to prevent the female from eating the male, then we have to assume that in this species, the female actually does do that. So we're going to consider this an ancestral behavior, and it's going to appear at the very base of this tree. So we'll do it right here. And we will say, a hypothesis is that the female eats the male, and so the male is actually the nuptial gift. To preclude that from happening, the male, at least some males, bring an insect gift, which then goes to fixation, and so males bring a gift to the female. One reason the male might actually bring an insect gift, as I mentioned, instead of him being the nuptial gift that provides resources for offspring, the insect then does. But this is predicated on the male being able to find another female. So if, let's say in the beginning, we have this situation where the female eats the male, but if she didn't eat the male still would not be able to find another female to impregnate, then there would be no reason for that male to bring a gift, since he would actually be the gift. So first, we have to assume that the female eats the male as a gift. And the female only does that because the male is unlikely to find another female later on. So to stop that from happening, the male then brings an insect gift, the female eats the insect gift, and he's able to then go on and find other females to mate with. Now the question then becomes, later on, in this area up here, the male brings an empty gift. In other words, he's not actually providing a nuptial gift. He's providing something that looks like a nuptial gift that lets a female lets him mate with a female. But earlier, the nuptial gift actually provides, we have to assume, it provides resources to the female to produce offspring. That means we also have to assume if he's bringing an empty gift, that the female then has resources that she has access to where she doesn't really need the gift anymore. Just the signal of the gift gets inspires her to have sex with the male. As an alternative to that, it could be that the male has brought an empty gift, but the female is no longer very discerning about whether that's a real gift of an insect or not. And so this is actually a maladaptive strategy on her part because she doesn't really have extra resources. She's actually assuming that the gift is real. She doesn't have to think this, obviously, but that the gift is real and provides resources for offspring. But it might have been that by this time she has lost an ability to discern whether it's a real gift or not. We're now going to discuss some classic ethological concepts. Ethology is the study of animal behavior. The first we're going to look at is fixed action pattern. Konrad Lorenz was one of the first ethologists, along with Nico Tinbergen. And a fixed action pattern is an innate response. It's completely instinctual. It's a motor response that may be initiated by some environmental stimulus, but can continue to completion without the influence of an external stimulus. So many behaviors, a lot of different systems are involved. There might be some environmental stimulus, let's say it's a visual stimulus, to flee a predator, for example. Once that stimulus is there, there's a cascade effect. That starts a neurological response that is usually automatic. It does not involve any thinking. Obviously, if there's a stimulus for danger, you don't want to think about should I escape or not. You want to escape. So it's completely innate. A monster comes in the room, everybody flees. And then there's hormones involved, the adrenal system. There's neurons involved, neurons that map to actually go directly from the visual cortex to attachments to a muscle, and the victims flee. Okay. With a fixed action pattern, the sequence is unalterable. In other words, it starts out a certain way, and it always goes that way. There's no deviation. All individuals do this same fixed action pattern in the population. If an individual, let's say, has a mutation and doesn't do this, it's unlikely that it's going to survive and breed. So it's a dead end. Selection, in this case, purifying selection, removes that allele that stops the fixed action pattern from happening. So a fixed action pattern is not learned. It's ready to go from the beginning. It may be triggered under inappropriate circumstances. Earlier, we I showed you that video of the bull and the motorcycle, and even though the motorcycle you might say perhaps looks a little like a female cow, but not really. But it's enough of a similarity that it stimulates the bull, because he's got all these high hormones going on, because females at this point of time are probably in estrus, that the bull responds to the motorcycle as it would to a normal female. So many times you can have the actual stimulus doesn't actually have to be the exact female cow. It has to be a reasonable facsimile, which under some cases can lead to an inappropriate response. And then, of course, I mentioned all appropriate members of the species respond the same way. Obviously, if there's a mutation in one and it doesn't respond that way, then it will probably not lead offspring. Okay. Now, this is all the stuff that we're dealing with here are basically innate responses. That means it's instinct. They don't have to learn things to do it properly. Okay? As we're going to see, on the other side of the Atlantic, namely in the United States, people really didn't look at this. They looked at it more in terms of learning, with various psychologists and behaviorists saying, well, we're basically a blank slate, and if we're raised properly, we'll be taught to do any kind of behavior that's taught. But in this case, what we have is, for innate responses, we have assigned stimuli. In other words, some sort of stimuli that initiates the behavior. Sometimes you could say a stimulus or a releaser, they're both basically the same thing. Usually it has to do with whether it's another species that's the stimuli, let's say predator-prey and fear response, or whether it's the same species, but it doesn't really matter. A stimulus or a releaser are basically the same in terms of the words, they mean the same thing. Either one is a stimulus for the fixed action pattern. This is a northern flicker. These are woodpeckers that are found around here. In fact, they're found all across the United States for the most part. On top, as I've already shown you right here, this is the female. Here's the male. The male, as I've shown, here's the mustache. Here's the mustache. The mustache is actually a signal, communication signal. It's a communication signal for females, and it's also a communication for other males. The mustache and it is actually a stimuli and a visual releaser. So if a male encounters another male in his territory, the territorial male aggressively chases away the intruder. And it recognizes this by the mustache itself. I think in this case, the mustache also tells the female as well. Now, there's something else that's going on here. There's also this little spot on the head as well in the male. Now, sometimes a visual stimulus, let's say to the female or to this other male, might be an indication of condition. There are these birds that are around here. They're called house finches. Males have a red head and red chest. The females don't. They're just kind of a little LBJ, little brown jogger, we call them. Little brown bird. So the female of this species judges a male in terms of quality on how bright the red is on the male. And the red on the male is directly proportional to the kind of diet that they have. In other words, well, in terms of anthocyanins. So anthocyanins are found in plants, mainly in seeds. These are seed eaters. And males that are better at foraging usually have a redder head because they get more anthocyanins. So that's an indication of male quality, either because of the diet he has, but also probably because of foraging ability as well. So some males have a light red or even orange, indicating that they're not as good a forager to a female. So if a female sees a male with a bright red head, that's the releaser to the female saying, oh, I'm a high quality male, you want to mate with me. Not only do I have a good diet, but we can set up a territory and raise our offspring, and I also probably have good genes so that our offspring will have good genes as well. Okay. These are three-spine sticklebacks, and it actually the males, and this is interesting. Anybody know what polyandry is? Yeah.
Isn't that multiple sexes in one organism?
No, not quite. Okay. Now, are there many females and one male, or many males and one female? Okay, for polyandry. Right. So, polygyny is the opposite. You have an elk that's a bull elk. He's better than all the other males around him. He excludes all the other males. The females are basically his harem. That's polygyny. In this case, it's polyandry. There's usually what happens is the female comes around and lays eggs in a male's nest, and the male actually tends to the offspring versus the female. So a female could, in this case, normally females have lower, less variation in reproductive success. They make only so many eggs, period. But if they can actually have a bunch of different males raise their offspring, they can leave more offspring. So in this case, you have polyandry. Territories, there might be some characteristic about successful territories versus unsuccessful ones. Perhaps it's what they do is the males actually make a nest. Perhaps it's pebble size. The pebbles in this territory are the right size for making a proper nest. In this other, it's really fine silt and you can't make any sort of structure at all. It could be something like that. So in this case, the male defends against another male trying to come in and take over the territory, or even coming in and eating the eggs. Well, here we have basically, God, it really doesn't show very well. Okay, so it turns out there's a red belly down there. Doesn't really show here. Here. Why isn't it showing red? Okay, well, it doesn't matter. Now, these are actually crude models of a red belly. Okay, so in this case, okay, we have a thin red belly. In this case, a thicker red belly, slightly kind of thin and long, but not like that, and then even thicker. Okay. Now, so when you actually present models of this, to see this is going to be assigned stimuli. in terms of how the resident male reacts to an intruding male. So in this case, the stimuli doesn't have to necessarily be the real fish. It can be something that's a reasonable facsimile. It's usually the red that is the releaser or the stimulus. So it turns out crude models with red bellies were more effective in eliciting aggression from males than was the more realistic replica that lacked the characteristic red belly. So if we have up here, this doesn't have a red belly, but these guys do, even though this looks more like a fish up here, the male is more likely to actually respond appropriately if there's a proper amount of red belly showing. So that's actually the Stein stimulus. Or prairie dogs. They have things that eat them. Usually 3 different kinds of things. Flying predators, terrestrial predators like coyotes and things like that, or snakes. Okay? They actually are they discern among different kinds of predators when they actually can signal too, especially if it turns out they have kin in the general vicinity. In terms of an aerial predator, researchers have flown, like they put a string across and then they fly what looks like a predator, like a hawk, but all it needs to do is look somewhat like a hawk to elicit the proper behavior in terms of running away. Okay, so this is the same sort of thing. Okay. Okay. So this is a case here of a brood parasite. Anybody know what a brood parasite is?
Plants its own young in a nest.
What's that?
It plants its own young in a nest, so it's raised by the other.
Yeah. So in this case, the widow bird with a long tail, the female comes in and lays its own egg in the nest of this poor little finch. And then the finch, of course, raises the offspring. This is an antagonistic coevolutionary process, so there's this kind of arms race that's going on. To defend against this, finches have, they've discerned whether the eggs look the same or not, or the chicks look different. Usually the widow bird's chick is bigger and grows faster and eats all the food and at the expense of all the other ones. Okay? So, now, in this case, okay, so we've got, hold on a second. Okay, now that's better. Okay, God, why isn't it showing red? Anyway, the finch, top left, up on top. Here we are. Is the host of the long-tailed paradise widow bird. The gaping signal and markings on the inside of the mouth of the host species, bottom left, are mimicked by the nestlings of the brood parasite. In other words, without these actual markings, as we've shown here, the host would be able to say, oh, this is not my offspring, and not feed it. Maybe kick it out of the nest. So they've developed a defense for recognizing this, in this case, the stimulus or the releaser. Now, the trouble is, there's been strong coevolutionary pressure to overcome the defense of discerning between my offspring versus a widow bird's offspring. Okay? So, in this case, we're using mimicry as a form of deceptive signaling. In other words, it's not an honest signal. If the widow bird's mouth didn't look that way, it would have lower fitness. The offspring would probably be tossed out of the nest. And so there's been a strong co-evolutionary pressure. Now, of course, there's now pressure for counter defense, right? So it says these key stimuli that release the feeding behavior of the parents, right? And it's, in this case, the widow bird is trying to pull one over in terms of its offspring on the host bird. Interestingly, oh, we're almost done. Interestingly enough, we don't have widow birds here. We have cowbirds, and cowbirds do the same exact thing. Cowbirds lay their eggs in host birds like warblers, finches, all sorts of different things. But not only a cowbird actually does something different. It becomes a gangster. So the female lays eggs in all these different hosts. Instead of just leaving, she sticks around. She checks on all these different nests that she laid eggs in. If there's any sign that the host, let's say it's a finch, starts tossing out eggs or anything like that, she comes in and destroys the nest. It's kind of like, it's extortion. I mean, that's basically what it is. This is kind of interesting. You know, everything in our lives, there's competition, there's extortion, there's all kinds of different things in human behavior. Just about everything that you see in human behavior is found in other animals, mainly because it's the same selective forces that are actually operating. Now, if we were all altruists, out of the goodness of our heart, you wouldn't need all this stuff, but people aren't that way. There are some people, maybe, I'd say, let's say you had a class of 100 people, there might be some sociopaths in there. You know, some would be stronger sociopaths than another. So you'd look around and you'd think, I wonder if he's a sociopath. A lot of times sociopaths actually look like nice people. They're charismatic and stuff. Hopefully, all they do is they just start big companies to make lots of money. Otherwise, they might do nefarious things, like kill other people. But anyway, those same sort of things that are going on in terms of signals and deceptions. In fact, people actually think that they're usually better judges of character than they actually are. Psychologists have done studies showing different kinds of faces and who's a nefarious individual versus who's a trustworthy one. And it turns out that a lot of humans aren't very good judges of that. But it does turn out also that sociopaths, well, it's pretty easy to pick out a victim. Victims kind of look very similar in general. So if you are in a bad neighborhood and you are worried about getting rolled by someone, don't be furtive, like looking like this, there's someone out to get you. You want to puff yourself up. It's hard for me to do because I'm so short, but I can do it. And you want to look people straight in the eye. So they think, oh, well, maybe that'd be too expensive to take this guy on. Of course, that might just stimulate aggression on the other side too, so it's hard to say. But we don't live in a society quite like that. But if you want to experience it, go to South Africa. South Africa is a really dangerous place. High murder rate. People are poor. They're running around and they're looking for victims. That if you get stopped, you're driving a car at a signal, sometimes they'll jump in, shoot you, and then steal your car. Okay? It's a much different kind of society than we are used to whatsoever. So, not every place is such a nice place as well. I guess it's kind of dangerous here too sometimes. But anyway, we'll call it an afternoon, and then I'll see you next Monday. Do something fun for the weekend. I don't care what it is. And then you can post about it too. I went and got on a big roller coaster. I went to Winnemucca and robbed a bank. Something like that, okay? And then you can, that's behavior too, so that we can then discuss that properly. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good.
Okay,
Amazing.
bye-bye.